When looking for the king of podcasts, you're at the wrong channel.
Well, excuse me!
Looking for good ideas for life? You're far from good hands.
Hey, bud, what's your problem?
If you think the listener is always right, you're far from the right place.
Out of order! Even in the future, nothing works!
Hosted by a Northeasterner by birth, but a rebel by choice.
Are you threatening me?
If you want a host that floats between love and madness,
and we know the night is always gonna be here anyway. Thinking of you's working up my appetite, looking forward to a little afternoon delight.
then play on and listen to Crazy Train Radio.
All right, guys, listen to this blues riff and B. Watch me for the changes and try and keep up, okay?
Within the gaming world, there are your general gamers, but then there are those that enjoy the dark underbelly of gaming. If you're one of those that enjoy the dark underbelly of gaming, we certainly got the place to send you. Scorpion Lair Games. That's right, Scorpion Lair Games is the creators of the true crime hit Killers, the card game. Let's not forget they also have Killers Clothing Company, the profiler game, and things like the 5-Minute Murder channel on YouTube. And we certainly can't forget the new book that is certainly a hit, Beyond the Headliners, True Crimes, Myths, and Legends. Make sure you visit Jeff and the Scorpion Lair Games on Facebook and everywhere today.
Hi, this is Dean Cundy. I'm talking to you with great delight on Crazy Train Radio.
Hey folks, it's your least favorite host in the podcast world, Croc, Jonathan Steele. And boy, do we have a good one for you today. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, this next guest had an old motto of win if you can, lose if you must, but always cheat. However,
Wait.
Go ahead.
That is a quote. I'm going to stop you right there. That is a quote attributed to me. I am not the originator of that quote. It was Patera used to say that, and somehow through the years, it's been attributed to me. I always correct that. That was Kenny Patera's quote, not mine.
And you have
the rest of this introduction, I can say, and I love Ken, great guy since I've dealt with him, but he can't say this.
Sure.
The resume certainly speaks for itself. He's been an author of several books, such as Marijuana Manifesto, which we'll talk a little bit about today, marijuana. They Killed Our President, my favorite book, because I'm a historian and study Kennedy. Democrips and ReBloodlicans, American Conspiracies. He served in the Navy as a Navy SEAL, professional wrestler and broadcaster. And what we were just talking about before we started this, He was the 38th governor of Minnesota from 1999 to 2003. That's right, Governor Jesse Ventura. Governor, how are you?
I'm doing great, guys, and thanks for having me. But I would like to add one more if I could.
Please do.
People always forget in 1990, I won the mayor of the sixth largest city in Minnesota, Park, Minnesota. So when I got in as governor, I had 4 years of executive experience as a fairly major, it's the sixth largest city in Minnesota. And dealing at that level as a mayor is when you truly learn on the ground politics, because I had to run a city council meeting every Monday, and you got to face the people eye to eye at a city council meeting. That's where you truly learn government is down at that level. And I had 4 years of that experience that people forget about.
Hey, Governor, can I ask, aren't you glad you don't have to do those city council meetings today?
Yes and no. I enjoyed them because I allowed everyone to talk. I allowed everyone, if you're a tax-paying citizen, to speak your piece. As long as you didn't, get vulgar or threaten anyone or things of that nature, I'd put a stop to that type of behavior. But for the most part, I found it being on the ground politics like that, there's no replacement for it.
Well, I'll tell you, I know we're not necessarily going to talk too much politics today, although I'm more than willing to. I just have to say that I have always admired you as a politician, Governor Ventura. I haven't agreed with all of your policies, as no one should agree 100% with everybody. But the fact that you truly believed that the government is the government of the people, by the people, for the people, you're the only one who lived up to that, who didn't want to be the career politician. You could have won re-election in a landslide, and you said, that's not how it's supposed to be. And I admire the hell out of you for that. That's you are a true patriot, and thank you so much for your service in every respect.
Thank you. One of the things I always like to criticize and try to improve our government, I think Mexico has a way better system on president than we do. The country,
really?
Yeah, in Mexico, they're elected for 1 6-year term.
Yeah.
You get 6 years to do what you want to do and try to accomplish what you want to accomplish, but then there's no reelection. You don't have to raise money to be reelected, and you don't have to sell your soul to rock and roll to get reelected. Because like when I was in office, it was President Fox. Mm-hmm. And President Fox was there longer than me because he served 1 6-year term. I wish our country would go to 1 6-year term for the presidency.
Sometimes 6 years might be too long in some cases.
Well, maybe, but maybe not. But you would at least, look what you have now in the House. Okay,
if you're the problem.
If you're a congressman elected to the House, you spend your first year getting acclimated. Your second year, you got to run for re-election. Your third year, you might be able to do some work. And your fourth year, you're running for re-election again. So that means 3 out of the 4 years are baloney.
And
you're not getting nothing done. 1 out of the 4 years, you're actually working. So why don't we have consistency of the same amount of years and get rid of re-elections, and then you wouldn't have to worry about career politicians so much as to establish in term limits. If you're only allowed to do 1 term, that's term limits.
Yeah, plus it's the lowest approval rating of any job in the world, and they get reelected overwhelmingly, which makes no sense to me.
Well, there's a lot of, what else and then we'll switch subjects, but what else I'd like to see done? Why do they put parties on election ballots?
Yeah, so people who don't know the things can just vote down the line. It's ridiculous. I agree with you.
That could be stopped locally.
Yeah.
At local levels, you could pass ordinances and pass things saying the only thing that goes on an election ballot is the candidate's name. And that way it's up to you as a voter to educate yourself. What does John Smith stand for? And that way you get rid of this, well, I'm a conservative, so I vote Republican, even though I don't know any of the candidates, or I'm liberal, I vote Democrat. I don't know none of their names. I look for the party name. Well, let's eliminate that and let's make our voters educate themselves.
Absolutely. I wish that we could educate the voters more in this country.
See, that's why I deserve to become dictator for 4 years.
Well, I don't know, because I honestly don't think I could have a dictator whose doll I used to play with when I was a kid.
Oh, yeah. Knock it off. Wait a minute. I'm going to correct. That's an action figure.
It's
that
not,
ain't no doll.
It's a doll because the joints don't move.
It's an action figure. And I say that with my friend, the late great Rudy Bosch. He was at Navy SEAL on the first Survivor, and they came out with those. And I was at a reunion, and somebody came up to Rudy and said, "Rudy, will you sign your doll?" And Rudy spun around in the chair and goes, "That's not a doll. That's an action figure."
That's great.
You don't say to a 44-year veteran of the Navy Underwater Demolition SEAL Team that he has a doll. That's just not done. That's an action figure.
Well, my Jesse Ventura action figure was the champ. So
anyway, let's go to cannabis.
Yes, that's the reason I reached out to you. And first of all, Governor, Brian will tell you, I've been so excited, and I was finally able to get you because of Jesse Ventura Farms. And first and foremost, because we were talking about Governor Walz before we started the recording, but first question from me anyway with this, and I'm not an expert on marijuana, but what are your thoughts of it becoming mainstream and mostly legal across the board, especially because Governor Walz invited you to his office to sign a bill?
Yeah, first of all, I was there because Governor Walz called me at home. And he said, "Governor Ventura," he said, "I think you need to be in my office Monday at 11 a.m. And I said, "Why?" He said, "Because at 11 a.m. I'm going to sign and end the prohibition of cannabis in Minnesota." He said, "This was your idea." He said, "You were the one that tried to do it over 20 years ago." And like we both agreed, I lit the match. Fortunately, for 20 years, there were advocates out there who kept that match burning. And that match turned into a small little fire that they kept burning for 20 years. And Governor Walz called me that Monday because he said, "I think you should be over my right shoulder because this is your idea and you're still alive. You should be there when I sign the end of prohibition. I want to be able to hand the pen to you." And I thought that was very gracious of him. It shows the kind of person he is. He didn't want to take credit for it. He said, "Governor Ventura, you are the one that deserves credit. I just finished your work." He said, "It took 20 years to do it, and I happened to be here when your work got finished." And so I was very honored by that. And it was also something that made you feel good that you could have an impact, and that it was such an impact that people would continue to carry the torch long after you're out of office, and then to ultimately 20 years later see the prohibition be lifted. And you guys know the reason why I'm so enthusiastic is because cannabis saved my wife's life.
How's she doing?
She's doing okay. She's doing great. She doesn't have seizures. She's got other issues, but they're not seizures now because cannabis has taken care of that. And, she started epileptic seizing 2 to 3 times a week. And these are the debilitating kind where you're down on the floor. And they put her on 4 different seizure medicines. None of them worked. They all had horrible side effects, pharma. And in desperation, we had friends in Colorado that we knew from our home in Mexico. We drove to Colorado. Our friends illegally went in and bought it for us because we weren't Colorado residents at the time. My wife took the first 3 drops under the tongue out in Colorado and has never had a seizure since.
Well, it's amazing how far ahead of the curve you were on this. And it just shows the stigmatism that marijuana carried. I am not a marijuana user.
Do you know why I'm ahead of the curve?
But I've always been for legalization.
Do you know why I'm ahead of the curve?
Because you're Jesse the Brain.
No, not at all. I grew up in the 60s.
Well, that's true too.
Come on, I had a head start. You know,
you did.
I saw way back then. I'll tell you the first time I smoked marijuana. I had finished being an athlete in high school. It was springtime. My friend's parents went to southern Minnesota, and we had the house for Friday night. Not a good combination.
Or a very good combination, depending on how you look at it.
But anyway, my best friend's friend was at the time at the University of Minnesota, so he was 3 years older than us. And we started our usual partying in those days was with alcohol. I lived the life. Have you seen American Graffiti?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
That's my childhood. That if you watch American Graffiti, you'll see Jesse Ventura. I grew up right by Lake Street, South Minneapolis, and that was the drag strip for all the muscle cars. And you could be entertained. Just go down there on the weekend and you'd see dragging all night long. But anyway, we got to my friend's house. My friend's older brother pulled out a joint. And we were all amazed because we had only heard about this marijuana stuff. And so he lit it up and he showed us how to smoke it, how to inhale it and hold it in and exhale it. And I will tell you this, and we were drinkers. You know, you score the booze, you get the alcohol, drink. That's what it was all about when I went to high school. And when I took my first puff of marijuana and exhaled it, I turned to all my friends and I went, wow. I said, this is way better than alcohol. Way better. Because I got, I guess, the feeling off the first hit of what marijuana did to you. And I then lived through the 60s, although I spent most of my time serving in the Navy, which didn't allow you to smoke pot or anything like that. So, my pot smoking then got delayed till after I got out of the service. Pretty much.
Yeah, I was always a drinker. Never was a pot smoker. Still not. But I've always been in favor of legalizing it for A, its medicinal purposes. B, it's not as dangerous as alcohol or nicotine and tobacco, which I've been addicted to my whole life. And
oh, absolutely.
The fact that you were so far ahead on it, and you're seeing it nationwide. You're seeing so many states legalizing it, recognizing it for its medicinal purposes, and you were at the forefront of that.
I'm going to differ with you on that. Oh, yeah, I was on the forefront of it because it was pot and it should be legal. You want to know why most of these states are legalizing it now?
Money. Taxes.
Yep.
Taxes. Yep. They're seeing the revenue that cannabis, marijuana, that's why they're overtaxing it. In many of the states, there's special taxes for cannabis. All we ask is to be treated the same as alcohol. That's all we ask. Treat us the same as alcohol. No more tax, no less tax than what you have on alcohol.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people point to it being made illegal in the first place because of, folks like William Randolph Hearst, who owned the paper mills and knew that hemp paper was going to be cheaper. So they demonized this thing to make it illegal and made a prohibition on it that just blew into crazy proportions for no reason.
Do you know why? Do you know why it's so American? You want the ultimate argument? I can give it to you.
Here
it is. Betsy Ross's flag and the Constitution of the United States are written and made of marijuana.
That's it.
And I'll add this. 10 years ago, if Thomas Jefferson would have been alive, he'd be serving 20 years in the federal penitentiary. What do you think Tom Jefferson was growing?
Pot and marijuana.
Thomas Jefferson would have been busted as a drug dealer.
Yep.
20 years ago.
Yeah, it's amazing how history is so full of.
How do you bust Thomas Jefferson?
Well, you can bust him for some other things too.
Yeah, there's other stuff, but not the. Brian, if I can interject here, Governor, I'm curious to know, in terms of Jesse Ventura Farms and stuff, you guys are working with Retro Bakery, but with some of the profits of the sales and such, from what I understand, you guys are trying to help local organizations and such. So what is the goal of helping organizations?
Well, we want to help some of the local organizations help the people who have been busted for marijuana. You know, you have people now who have it on their records and people who've had their lives changed simply because they chose to smoke a plant or use a plant. And as I like to tell all my religious friends, if you believe God created everything, then that means God created marijuana too.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And I don't think he created it for it to be destroyed.
No.
I don't think that was the idea of it.
No, he created it for it to be burned.
Yeah, well, not even burned. He created, as Tommy Chong told me, it's a complete medical plant.
It is.
You know, and like Tommy said, they make a mistake when they divide it into medical and recreational. Tommy said the entire plant's medical. He said those that smoke it for the euphoric feeling are doing it for their mental health, like post-traumatic stress combat veterans, things of that nature. And my view is this world is a tough enough place to get through. If in the evening you want to smoke a joint and it makes you feel good, what the hell is wrong with that?
Nothing wrong with that, Governor.
The only thing wrong with it is if someone can't figure out how to profit off it. Don't you understand?
Well,
that's America.
That's the great thing about cannabis. You can grow your own.
Exactly.
There doesn't have to be a profit. If you're the poorest guy in the world, you probably can water your lawn. Well, if you can water your lawn, you can grow a pot plant.
There you go.
Well, last question with the Jesse Ventura Farms, and I just mentioned about Retro Bakery, and I know you're selective, Governor, on who you get behind business-wise or whatever, but what was it about Retro Bakery to say, you know, I'm going to work with them to create this brand?
Well, I went to and I made the statement I wanted to be the first high-level politician to put his endorsement on cannabis. I used to be a Miller Lite All-Star.
Mm-hmm.
You know, light beer from Miller. They wrestle light. What was it again? Lightomania. You know, the whole thing. They did a whole 2-week, 3-week, month advertising thing back in the 80s. And I thought, marijuana is way better than alcohol. I want to promote marijuana, and I want to be the first politician to do it. Well, I announced it that night, and it was very interesting because that very night, Retro Bakery walked up and handed my son an offer. They were there. And now we looked at about a half a dozen or more different companies and what they provided. But Retro Bakery, it just seemed it had you know how you know something's right?
That gut feelings.
Yeah, you just and Retro Bakery and us, we both had that feeling that we both needed each other and we were made for each other. And so we went and looked at their operation. We saw who it was, and I love the idea that it's so diverse, Retro Bakery is. I love where it's located, right where I used to be mayor on the border of Brooklyn Park and Brooklyn Center. You know, it's right where not far from Ventura Village, a portion of North Minneapolis or South Minneapolis that some developer named after me. You know, nice. This part of the city. You know, and Retro Bakery fit into that mold. And foremost, and I'll say this, we tasted their products.
Well, you gotta test. You gotta taste.
Exactly.
Test.
No, and that's what put them over the top. I mean, when you eat their chocolate and you eat their edibles, we put the taste first, the marijuana second. We knew what the marijuana do, but we had to have the delivery system for it. which is the chocolate and the goodies, and making it to where you would sit down and eat this regardless if it had marijuana in it or not. That's what we were looking for too, and that's where Retro Bakery fit the bill. You know, and it just came together, and it seemed like it was the right thing, and we rolled the dice, and they rolled the dice, and we'll see what happens.
I do want to mention, as we change topics, Brian, I do want to mention that if you're looking into Jesse Ventura Farms, I know I mentioned this during the introduction, but I also have my physical copy with me as well of Marijuana Manifesto. So check out that book as well. It's a very educational read. So get the book plugged in too. But go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, I was going to say, before I move on, we keep talking about Minnesota, Minneapolis. A mutual friend of ours, the historian and wrestling historian out of Minneapolis, George Shire, wanted me to say hello to you. Says he hasn't seen you since Larry Henning's funeral, and just how amazing it was that you actually showed up at it, when so many people in the business don't support the boys even when they pass. But he wanted me to send his love to you and say how much he loves you and admires you. So
thank you. Well, Larry Hennig and his son Kurt are to Minnesota wrestling as foundation as you can be. I mean, I grew up to Larry the Axe Hennig. I grew up as a teenager watching him, and then I had my day. And I remember one of the greatest matches I ever had in the AWA was Adrian Adonis and myself against Larry and Kurt. Oh, it was a phenomenal match that we had.
Glad you brought up Adrian, because I currently live and reside in Kenmore, New York, not just a mere few blocks from where he grew up.
Okay.
Your friend Adrian.
Adrian and I had one of the best matches we'd had in the AWA against Larry. Kurt had just broken in, and so the match was perfect. All we did was torture Kurt and give Larry the comeback.
That's all you needed to do.
It was such a simple recipe. It was the recipe was so easy. It was like boiling water. Put the water on the heat and let it boil. Because it was so perfect, because we torture Kurt, his son. Larry couldn't make the tag. We'd stop him every time, just short of making the tag. And then when Larry got the tag, it was just feed yourself to the axe and the crowd's going to go crazy. Oh. And they did. You and Adrian and I had a tremendous match with Larry and Kurt Hennig. And so getting back to going to Larry's funeral, I would have never missed it. There's no way that I could have not gone to Larry Hennig's funeral. And I'll say something about Larry. I don't know. He's gone now and he said it, so I don't think he'd care if I said it or not. But, between him and Vern Gagne, there developed a lot of hostility through the years, which with Vern and everybody, there was quite a bit of hostility.
Can't see that happening.
Yeah. I laughed today. Larry Hennig used to say it. He said it to me. He said, Vern Gagne is the only guy I know that'll have to hire his pallbearers.
Jesus Christ.
And I don't think Larry'd be mad at me. Here's a direct quote from him. I remember him saying that to me, and I turned away. I started laughing so hard, I turned away. I had to go, oh, my God.
You had such a great run in the AWA, and I think a lot of people forget how great your run in Portland was before that.
Jimmy Snuka.
Yeah, with the Snuka feud.
I was married to Jimmy Snuka for 2.5 years.
Yeah,
wrestled him, and then Buddy Rose.
Yeah, I was going to say that Buddy Rose.
I went from being partners with Buddy Rose, and it's the only time in my wrestling career that I turned into a situational babyface.
Well, unless you count to me as a kid watching you as well, because I always loved the heels. So I always cheered
that
for
don't
Jesse.
count. I was a villain. that little 3-month deal in Portland was the only time that I actually turned babyface, because I was going to work for Ed Francis in Hawaii then. So we had the big split between Buddy and I put him over and went to Hawaii, and Buddy became the top heel. I gave him the crown. And then Buddy held it there for probably, 10 years.
10, 15 years, yeah. All the way through the Piper feuds, yeah.
Buddy made a home out there.
Yeah, he did.
Well, Brian, since we're talking wrestling, besides your book, which I'm going to get the governor a copy of, The Wrestler's Wrestler, I wanted to bring up, because Jesse or Governor always got credit for it. And Tito Santana with his Don't Call Me Chico, which is the name of his book. Did you have a chance to see that book, Governor?
Yeah, Tito gave me a copy. I went to an autograph thing, and Merced happened to be there, and he gave me a copy of the book. I went back to my hotel that night, and I read it, and there were parts of it I literally fell off the bed on the floor laughing so hard. And part of it was he entitled the book "Don't Call Me Chico," and that's full credit to me. And I will say this: Tito Santana paid me the greatest compliment that anyone's ever paid me in the wrestling business. I was in it for 15 years, and then I left it and went on to do a few other things, like being a mayor and a governor and other things like that. But he paid me the greatest compliment when Tito said that I was the master at getting the most out of a crowd by doing the least. That, to me, is the greatest compliment I've ever been paid in wrestling. And that's why I've always maintained that people ask me who my favorite people were to ever wrestle. I always list Tito as number one, because Tito understood. Tito understood Jesse Ventura. And I knew when I went into the ring with Tito that we were going to tear the house down no matter how many minutes they asked for. Tito and I could give them to them without any problem whatsoever. He's up there, and who I also hold in that esteem in the ring is Jimmy Snuka.
Yes.
And I hold Jimmy there as a babyface, not as a heel.
Jimmy was something spectacular and otherworldly, especially in those Portland and then Mid-Atlantic years. But Merced or Tito, he came up and he was, football player, and he was great in Houston, and he had all this ability and all this, everything you needed. But it wasn't until you, especially the Chico thing. I mean, you made, his talent did, but it was Jesse Ventura who made Tito the legendary Tito Santana that everybody loved, because they all hated you so much for the Chico thing. You should be given just as much credit as him. I mean,
it's weird you say that to me, because do you know who else came up to me? And it was my son was standing with me, and his accolades to me were so much, and I appreciated it. God, I appreciated it. But it almost was embarrassing. You know who else did that to me?
Who?
Bret Hart.
Wow.
Bret Hart came up to me at one of these signings and literally said, "Governor," he said, "I want to take time for me and my family to thank you." Because he said, "I would not have been anything of what I turned out to be." He said, "You made my career." And I looked at him and I said, "Bret, come on." I said, "That was my job. All I did was my job." I said, "And remember this, Bret." I said, "If you didn't have the talent, I could say anything I wanted and it wouldn't have mattered. You also had to have the talent." But Bret Hart sat and told me on behalf of him, his father, his entire family, because I used to go through that rigmarole with Monsoon about Stu Hart's basement. I remember when I told Monsoon he ought to be sent there for 2 weeks. Gorilla, they ought to send you to Stu's basement for 2 weeks so you can learn something. Gorilla was phenomenal. Oh no, I ain't going down there. I remember tapes that Brett had in the locker room of guys screaming.
Oh.
And they were in Stu's basement getting stretched.
That's just,
trying to break into the business. But Bret Hart sat and basically gave me complete credit for him achieving and becoming the world champion and the whole thing. And if I did that, great. If I helped, great. But Bret had to have the talent to begin with. I can't make someone have talent.
No, but nobody did what you did better.
Thank you.
Nobody could be the heel broadcaster that you were, Governor.
Well, and let's give Vince some credit here.
I don't like to, but we will.
No, because I'll tell you the story. I had gone down with the pulmonary emboli right before going against Hogan. I lost my whole thing. 3 matches with Hogan. Imagine what that cost me financially.
Yep.
I'm in San Diego, lying in the Sharp Cabrillo Hospital intensive care for 7 days, hooked up to the front desk. My wife had to fly out there because the doctor said I may not make it for 7 days. I'm lying there, almost dead, pulmonary emboli, blood clots in the lungs. I came back to Minnesota, and now I face the dilemma that no wrestler, no pro athlete, no anybody like that wants to face. Forced retirement almost. What do I do now? What do I do if my career is over? I can't exactly go to General Mills and say, hey, I used to be a pro wrestler. Hire me as a vice president of marketing. What are you going to put on a resume?
Yeah. Pro
wrestler. And it ain't going to get you very far. Well, it was during my convalescing that Vince called me. And I'll tell you this, I will always owe a debt of gratitude to Cyndi Lauper. Now you're going to sit and say, what in the hell did Cyndi Lauper? Why would Jesse Ventura owe a debt of gratitude to Cyndi Lauper? And I'll tell you why. A friend of mine told me, Jesse, you know what you need to do? You need to become a sports announcer. A friend told me that. He said that. So I went to my friend Tom Ryther at Channel 11, and I told him what had occurred, told him what had happened. And Tom introduced me to the head guy at News 11, the local NBC. And he gave me John Hyjek, an award-winning cameraman producer who had won an Emmy. And he said, go out and do something. Cyndi Lauper was coming to town. I called Cyndi and her manager and said, could I get an exclusive interview with Cyndi? Of course you can. I went down there and Cyndi and I put our heads together and decided here's what it was going to be. Cyndi Lauper dyes Jesse Ventura's hair. What could be better? Look at who she was. She was part of that movement, and the rock wrestling thing was red hot. So we filmed it, Cyndi dyeing my hair. That night, she brought me out in front of her crowd, showed off the hairdo she had given me. Well, guess who saw this piece? Vince McMahon. And Vince, within 2 days, called me up. And Vince said, Jesse, I have an idea. I said, what is it, Vince? He said, nobody has ever put a villain on the microphone. Nobody. It isn't done. He said, I want to end that. He said, do you think you could do color commentating for me? I said, Vince, I know I could. You want to know why? Vince said, why? I said, because when I was a little kid watching NFL football, I used to turn off the sound and broadcast it myself. I told Vince that. And Vince said, okay, we're going to do it. You're going to be the first villain on the microphone. And so the rest is history. And I'll finish with this. The first night I was going on with Monsoon, Vince came up to me that night He said, Jesse, here's your marching orders. I said, what are they, Vince? He said, here's your mindset. If you it's true.
And
Absolutely.
no one did it better. Like
Well,
I said,
that's the handcuffs are off.
Yeah.
If I believe it, it's true. He just
I'm
gave
in.
me carte blanche. Go out there and perform. And that's what I did.
Governor, I had one question, non-wrestling, from when you were in office. I'd like to ask as we wrap up here, and thank you for the time.
Okay.
And
Sure.
check out Jesse Ventura Farms if you get a chance. But when you were in office, and I don't know what it was like, a story I heard was that you had a chance to meet Fidel Castro, but also they gave you problems trying to get your wife's passport to go. So you mind telling that story?
Well, I went to Cuba. Somehow they had lifted the embargo on certain agricultural products. So I led an entire trade representation down to Cuba, and I had a complete 1-hour meeting with Fidel Castro, just he and I. And it was a very interesting meeting. I will remember it my entire life. I will say this. I've shaken a lot of hands in my life, being mayor, being a governor, being in wrestling and all that. Fidel Castro had the most unique handshake of any person I'd ever met in my life. And I will remember that handshake from Fidel Castro till I'm in the grave. And that's a bold statement to make. That he had a handshake that I will remember to my death. And Fidel and I kept communicating. Our governments didn't know that, but I did.
We won't tell anybody.
Well, I know you won't, but
No.
no. Here's what happened. What was interesting. They okayed me to go down there, but the Bush administration restricted my wife's passport. They would not let the first lady accompany me to Cuba.
That's horseshit.
They wouldn't let her clear the border. They restricted her passport. And you know what it was over?
What?
Well, when men go on business trips and bring their wives, what do the wives generally do?
Go shopping.
Exactly. They didn't want my wife spending any American money in Cuba because of the embargo. She might have bought something which would do what? Prop up the Cuban economy?
to totally change it, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, whatever she would buy, I'm sure we'd spend enough that it would prop the Cuban economy up for maybe months. I don't know. I mean, have you ever heard of anything so silly? Let me finish with this. I was down there, and the last night down there, Castro had provided me with 3 bodyguards and an interpreter. And I turned to my bodyguards and I said, okay, it's my last night in Havana. I want you to show me the town. And they didn't know what to do. So they ended up taking me to the famous Club Havana nightclub. Now, there's not stripping there. Now, there are girls that dance in their native, array and all that, but they're not naked. There's comedians, there's music. It's a nightclub show. Well, this particular night, and I'm going to let you guys in on something, this particular night was a salsa dance contest, right? So they went to all the tables to get participants. Well, I'm sitting there with 3 of Castro's bodyguards, an interpreter, and my 2 bodyguards. Do you think anyone's going to volunteer from our table? No. Guess who did?
You did.
Yep. I volunteered. I don't even know how to do the salsa dance.
Well, what the
hell? I went up on stage, danced around, had a great fun. The judges met in the corner, right, when it was all over. And my Cuban interpreter came over to me, Ivan. Ivan came over to me and he said, Governor, He whispers to me, "Don't worry about a thing. They're deciding second place." Sure enough, I won.
Look,
I won the Salsa dance contest at the Club Havana. So you know what I wanted to do a year later? I wanted to petition George Bush, the kid, and see if he'd okay my passport so I could go back down and defend my title.
And the title.
Damn straight.
Absolutely.
And I never did it. I regret that I never did it. And the other regret, I'll finish with this. And it's one of only two major regrets I have in my life. The other regret is this. Fidel Castro personally invited me and my family to come down as his guest, and I never took him up on it, and he's gone now. And that's a regret I have in my life, that I never took Fidel Castro up on that. And I would have had to break the law here. I'd had to go through, Mexico and sneak in, and you couldn't let your passport find out or they'd revoke it and all that crap that goes on with it. But I would tell you this, if I ever were to become president, the first thing I'd do is lift the embargo on Cuba.
Absolutely.
The very first thing I would do. And I said that when I was there. I spoke at the University of Havana, and I led with that. I got a standing ovation for 5 minutes.
And I'll tell you, it's so sad that, you could be born just a little ways over the border into Canada, and it's perfectly legal to go there with your family.
Yeah. I got news for the U.S., and here's the news, and I'll finish with this. If they think the Cuban people are going to overthrow their government because of this embargo, they're not. The Cuban people are extremely proud people. I got news for you, U.S. They ain't going to let you win. You're not going to win. Lift the embargo. You ain't going to win. The Cubans would rather eat dirt than lose. And I will say that unequivocally.
Well, make
Governor,
sure you visit
I've
Jesse Ventura Farms. Brian, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I just got to say before we wrap up, what an honor and a privilege it's been to talk to you. Not only do I admire you as a political figure, you were a childhood hero of mine. I've been a fan my whole life, and I respectfully call you governor. But the message I have for my mother, she's like, he's still the body to me, because she just thinks about that body, and you are still the body.
Well, you could tell your mom this. I'm down to 215 pounds, so I don't have a lot of fat on me. But I also don't have 20-inch arms anymore either.
Yes. It's
Okay.
Jesse Ventura
Thanks,
Farms.
guys.
Governor, thank you so much.
Thank you, and keep up the great work, guys.
Appreciate it, sir.
Thank you, Governor.
Hey there, Friday fans. We know how much you enjoy the movies. Enjoy grabbing your Friday merchandise and interacting with the Friday family, whether it be at conventions or during our particular watch-alongs. Well, when you're looking to get yourself masks, why not check out our friends over at Camp Blood Customs out of New York State and order your specific custom mask from any of the films. All orders are made specifically. Your needs and wants are. Make sure you find Camp Blood Customs on Facebook, Instagram, and all over social media and order yours today.
Hi, this is Bruce Markison from Cooperstown, New York. I hope you'll listen to Crazy Train Radio.